Why is 18 considered the legal age to vote, join the military, consent to have sex with 18 or above ages, etc. etc.? When research tells us that the brain isn't fully matured until 25 or so. When these laws were set, marrying off a 16-year-old was not unheard of, and 12-year-olds worked in mines and mills, a minority, but still. An 8th grade education was common, and most 18-per-year-olds were adult members of society. Only recently has extended adolescence been the norm. Rights after age 18 would have been weird, and very unfair. Most 18-year-olds had been paying taxes for a while. 25 isn't a magical moment when you switch to being an adult. Imagine being 24 and your parents are still in charge of your every decision. After high school, that means they get to choose your career, your early relationships. 18 isn't fully baked yet, but it's pretty clearly too old for parents to be in total, legally binding control. Fully matured brains make better decisions. Same reason tobacco likes to hook them young. Can you imagine growing up knowing that will legally be a child until you are 25? How about having a baby and knowing that you will be responsible for it for 25 years? Actually, some people are mature and responsible in their teens and some not until their 30s, so it's hard to set an accurate age for adulthood. You don't want people with fully developed brains joining the military. They'll figure out it's bullshit too soon. You can't buy alcohol until 21 though in the US. Go figure. Something I haven't seen mentioned yet is that when these laws were set, we didn't know this about the brain. Adding to that, the idea of maturity is very vague. 25 is the average age your brain will stop developing and eventually start aging and deteriorating. Theoretically, 25 is around the time that your brain will be at the top of its game. But that doesn't mean all parts of the brain will be fully functional. There are many reasons why people of that age might still have cognitive issues. So even though we know the age around when the brain stops developing, that doesn't mean our laws should follow that guideline. Because shielding young adults from the full extent of society and then opening it up in one go at age 25 would be a terrible way to do things. Your brain develops little by little from being a baby to full maturity in your mid-20s, but it doesn't mean you're as naive at 18 as you are when you're a baby. 18-year-olds are deemed perfectly capable of learning adult tasks like drinking, driving and having sex, just not at the same time hopefully. If we had unsustainable amounts of crashes, alcohol problems and unwanted pregnancies, STIs in this age group to the point it created huge societal problems, then they'd have to do something about the rules. We all make questionable choices in young adulthood, but the majority of us are thankful for the experience and learn along the way. I'd rather be going into my 30s with some good life experience than going in cold turkey with no older adults to dig you out anymore. Because line must run somewhere and 18 was good enough when the limit was set. What makes you think you need a fully matured brain to make life decisions? What you need is enough basic life experience that you can understand actions and consequences, and that's often the case a lot earlier. Also, some of the years between 16 and 25 are the years of physical peak condition and the last really great years for a still growing brain to quickly learn and master new skill sets. Past 25, you start to decline physically unless you're dedicated to training, and you get set in your ways mentally. And then, of course, there's the whole historical part that I'll mostly gloss over, but not before mentioning that of the last few millennia, age of adulthood was around 12 to 13 years. Today's standard of 18 is already artificially extending childhood by quite a bit, though you might argue that's a necessity in an increasingly complex world and society. Either way, 25 would be ridiculous, and you'd get youth revolts all over every place you'd try to implement that idea. Another good reason not to go overboard. There's a lot to this, but quickly 18 is when most graduate HS, which used to be considered a full education, college was not necessary. Also old enough to physically carry a gun. Plus, if you have a fully grown brain, it would be more difficult to control. For what it's worth, just because your brain isn't fully matured at 18 doesn't mean you aren't capable of rational thought. Imagine being 24 years old and still be legally a child that can't make decisions for yourself. Because there will still be idiots over the age of 25. If we waited for biological brain maturity for everyone to expect them to make wise decisions, we would be vastly disappointed. The whole brain maturing at 25 inches thing isn't even exactly true. In reality, people mature at different rates, and most of this maturing happens with real-life experience. It's very difficult to get this kind of experience when your rights as an adult are limited, So by pushing the age of adulthood to 25, a lot of people would end up mentally stunted. The brain develops gradually throughout childhood and at different rates, so 18-year-olds might not be fully developed, but they are still relatively developed to a point where society thinks it's reasonable enough for them to make these decisions. Firstly, they didn't have that research centuries, decades ago when they started cementing the age of 18. Societies have historically used ages anywhere between 12 to 21 for various things. They're just taking a rough guess. Secondly, because the brain doesn't mature until 25 inches thing has become a bit of meme. The brain matures in parts and it's not fully finished in early ages, but that doesn't mean they're clueless and incapable of making their own decisions. We currently live in a society where 16 to 22-year-olds are being treated as if they are in a stage of prolonged childhood, and the stuff about the brain not being developed is being used an excuse to infantilize anyone under the age of 25 in support of our already existing cultural notions. Subsequent to the above, this would make zero sense in a society where 16 to 18-year-olds are already considered adults. Thirdly, imagine telling 24-year-old Caesar or Napoleon to chill out because their brain isn't fully matured. Sounds a bit silly, doesn't it? People largely stop being controllable around 16-ish. If you tell 22-year-olds they can't drink, or smoke, or work, or have sex, they're going to ignore you anyway. It would be dumb to change it to 25. That's 1/4 of your freaking life, if you live until 100. If you die at like 50, it's half your life. Give me a break. People don't need to be perfectly mature to consent, live life. If they did, we'd wait until everyone was wise, so let's wait until 40 to 50. You can start driving at 16 in the US. It's also about a normal, reasonable maturity level at that age is enough to make those type of decisions. It was only about like 15 to 20 years ago that it was raised to 21 for alcohol. At least, for the Army, 25 is kind of a high age for the minimum age requirement to join.